The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show. It's been a while. I'll talk to you in a while. I guess 5 straight days of no Yaron Brook shows. I don't know what you guys are doing. Got any withdrawal syndromes? I think I have. Missed you. All right, well, we're back. We're back to a regular, semi-regular, alternating, changing day-to-day schedule. We'll be here today, Thursday, probably Saturday and Sunday, and then we'll see next week. Who knows what's going to happen? What's going to happen next week? So we'll get back on a fixed, not fixed, alternating but semi-regular schedule. No more 5-day breaks because there's no traveling. I drove up to Northern California to visit some friends. It was a lot of fun. It was interesting. You drive up and there's everything is like the sky is all white and it's the fires are just brutal and the smoke is in the air and you could smell it and the quality of the air was horrible, but it was great. It was great to be in Northern California. It was great to see friends and hang out and relax a little bit. A lot of driving because I drove up, drove back. So a lot of driving, a lot of sitting. But it was a good trip. So Andy asked, when are we taking back Portland? Well, taking the first steps. We got billboards up. We got Yaron Brook Show billboards up in Portland. There are 2 of them. Haven't seen a kind of a response yet. So I haven't seen any spike in viewership. I haven't seen any spike in people come to the website. Not yet, but maybe this will build. Maybe I need to do some shows where Portland is in the headline, or maybe prioritize those. We'll see. But it'll be yes, it's going to be interesting to see if the billboards make any difference. I don't know. But kudos to those of you who helped fund it and get it all organized and put it all up. Ian, who did all the work, told me that it's quite a hassle and it's a lot of work. It's a non-trivial enterprise. I'm not sure if he's going to do that again. But for now, we've got one billboard up for a month, and the other billboard up will be up for 2 months. So we'll have plenty of time to see if there's any kind of responses. Jason is edgy because of his super chat. Yeah, well, we're gonna get the super chats. Don't worry, we'll get the super chats. So I've got all the super chats from the previous shows listed. We're gonna go down them all. I'm not deleting any of them. I mean, I might delete them by accident, but so far they're all there, and we'll start going down the list in a little while. You could also strategically change strategy, Jason, and ask fewer questions with more dollars, and you know that the $20 ones are more likely to be answered quicker than the other ones. But I will answer all of them. All right, a lot has happened while I was gone. There's tons of stuff in the news. I wasn't sure exactly what to talk about because there's so much we could do. We could do just some weeks are like dull and there's nothing there except the elections and who polls and who's up and who's down and all that, which is uninteresting to me. But this last few days has just been a ton in the news. So let's start, since Andrew asked a question here. Let's start with a question that relates to that's in the news, been in the news. I've been asked a lot about it. Everybody wants to know what I think of the peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Israel and Bahrain, all on the Gulf Coast, on the Gulf opposite Iran, on the other side of Saudi Arabia. And, the conservatives are making a big deal out of it. The Trump administration obviously is, it's an election year. Of course, they're going to take us they're going to make as much as they can out of it. I think Trump is now nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, although the chances he gets it, I think, are pretty almost zero. Certainly, he deserves it more than Obama deserved it for just being elected. But I am not a big fan of the Peace Prize anyway. You can ask me about that if you're interested. It's a bogus prize of a bunch of losers. What do I think? Israel signed this peace or normalization, depending on how you want to call it, agreement with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. So let's think about what characterizes the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and what have I said in the past about the kind of diplomatic relations that free countries should have with a variety of countries. Like I've always had 3 different categories of countries that you should relate to. One is other free countries, or broadly speaking, generally free. We know that there are no truly free countries out there in the world. Second category is unfree countries. And third category is unfree countries or are your enemies. UAE and Bahrain, I guess, in the past, have been always been unfree countries. So let's start with the fact that they're unfree. They're ruled by basically the equivalent of kings, right? Sheiks who control the territories. There's no rights. There's no individual rights. There's no, there's property rights only to the extent that the ruler wants to recognize those property rights. Because there's no real property rights. There's no constitution that protects any form of individual rights and individual freedom. There's no free speech. There are no rights for women. You do not want to be gay in these countries, and you probably don't want to be a foreign worker in these countries that treat foreign workers pretty brutally. Even though those foreign workers are often Muslims from Pakistan or from India, they still are treated pretty horribly. There are countries that have prioritized in the last few years, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. The attempts they've tried to diversify from oil. So these are tiny little countries, primarily that have made a lot of money and have huge amounts of money because of oil. And because they have ports where tankers can dock and can export oil out of there. They have pipelines, they have refineries, so they have oil. But over the last few decades, maybe a couple of decades, they have tried to diversify their sources of income, financial markets. Dubai has become a airline hub for many airlines, kind of if you travel between Europe and Asia, Dubai is a point at which you might change planes. So they're making a real effort. They're trying to bring in technology companies, but they really don't have the engineering talent there and the engineering ability. These are not particularly well-educated societies. They're not societies in which math, science, and so on are taught in school in any kind of systematic way. These are not societies where free thinking and thinking outside the box and engaging in thought and entrepreneurship are encouraged. So they have primarily focused on tourism and on finance and on airlines, hubs, and things like that. So these are authoritarian countries, not free countries. So they're certainly not in the category of basically free countries that you should have full diplomatic relationships with and celebrate and have great relationships with and so on. These are countries that are authoritarian. These are countries that are dictatorships. These are countries that treat their people pretty badly, together with Saudi Arabia. Countries ruled by, where there's no separation of state from religion, where Islam is the religion of the state. They might not be as radical as they used to be, and they've moved away from some of the Islamic radicalism. But again, these are not open, friendly, capitalist, freedom-loving places. Dubai has instituted some protection of property rights. They've instituted some loosening up of many restrictions in terms of religion to allow Westerners to come there because they want tourism, they want finance, they want people to be there. This is the way they're diversifying. So many foreigners, many Westerners go to Dubai, and it's safe and it feels comfortable, and even women. Although if you're a woman who travels to Dubai, it's not a pleasant experience. The way the Arabs look at you. Particularly if you've got darker skin and they think you might be an Arab woman and you dress like a Westerner, and that's completely unacceptable, and it's moderately dangerous for you. So these are not pleasant places. These are not nice places. These are not ultimately freedom-loving, pro-individual rights-loving people. Now, they have in the past been, charities and potentially even the governments themselves have been, certainly a blind eye is being turned by the government to the funding of Islamist terrorism, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and so on. And much of their money for ISIS, for example, came from the Gulf states. The Gulf states are UAE and Bahrain and Qatar and Kuwait. But UAE and Bahrain, the two countries that have signed a peace agreement as well. So not that long ago, these were emirates where a significant proportion or a significant number of the people within them that had money were funding kind of the worst Islamist terrorist organizations that we know of. So let's put them into perspective, right? Now, Israel signing a peace agreement with them probably represents a shift in their orientation. I think they have figured out, the rulers of these places have figured out that it's probably not a good idea, and they're probably not going to win long term by funding the Islamist jihadi types. That is not a winning strategy for them, and if they want to stay rich and if they want to diversify the economies, they better find ways to continue opening up to the West, to continue gaining the West's trust, and not committing themselves to a radical ideology. And to a large extent, that is an issue of survival for them, because at some point, if they promote ISIS and they promote Al-Qaeda too much, ISIS and Al-Qaeda will replace them. I mean, ISIS and Al-Qaeda is very much focused on replacing the Arab regimes in Arab countries that they don't believe are Islamist enough. First and foremost, they want to replace them before they do anything else. So they have to be careful not to make them too strong, right? Too strong. So they have decided that they better not fund these Islamists, although I'm sure they are hedging their bets and some money is still going to those causes. At the same time, they have probably been induced by the United States with money and promises of technology, and primarily, I think, from what I've been reading, promises of military technology, potentially advanced weapon systems, airplanes. They've been induced to normalize relationships with Israel. They have a lot to gain by normalizing relations with Israel. Israel is the most advanced country in the Middle East by far, technologically, culturally, but primarily technologically and militarily by far. They're already talking about bringing in Israeli technology, all kinds of technology, including military technology and including technology that could spy. Look, neither UAE or Bahrain, neither one of those were military threat to Israel. The primary threat that they posed to Israel was funding terrorism against Israel, and we will see if that stops. But they were funding Hamas and Hezbollah, and primarily Hamas. Hezbollah is funded by the Iranians primarily, and Islamic Jihad and others. And it'll be interesting to see if they stop funding Hamas. They've supported the Palestinians, but again, neither one of them is a military threat to Israel. So for Israel, this is kind of a no-brainer. There's very little change. It's potentially diversifying their oil sources. It's potentially limiting the funding that these countries these fiefdom will provide to terrorist organizations. It's a great PR gig, particularly for Netanyahu, who's not very popular right now in Israel. And it plays this idea that Israel wants peace with all its Arab neighbors, which is true. But the actual value that Israel gets from it is minimal. For the UAE and for Bahrain, it solidifies their relationship with the United States. It gives them military equipment. It gives them Israeli technology. There's been trade between the UAE and Israel. It's just been under the table. Now to be over the table, they'll have another place to sell their oil. Not that I think that's a big consideration for them. And importantly, it is part of a broader strategy in the Middle East to combat what UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and others view as the primary enemy in the Middle East, and that is Iran. Iran is very, very close. It's just over the strait, over the Gulf, to UAE and Bahrain. It's not Bahrain, it's Bahrain. It's a H, right? I think Bahrain, and so it's Iran is a real threat. There are a lot of Shiites in the area. There are Shiites in these countries. That these countries are dominantly Sunni, like Saudi Arabia, but even Saudi Arabia has a significant minority of Shiites. They're afraid of these Shiites. They're afraid of the Iranians. The Iranians have made significant gains over the last few years by dominating Iraq, by dominating Syria, and by dominating Yemen. Saudi Arabia has tried to fight them off in Yemen and try to support Sunnis in. All right, he says the H is emphatic. Bahrain. All right, he look maybe I guess I'll trust him. He says, "Trust me, bro." The Saudis have tried to support the Sunnis in Syria. They've tried to support the Sunnis in Iraq. They've lost in both those places. The Shiites dominate. Assad is in power in Syria, not going anywhere. In spite of the Sunni majority in Syria, the Shiites are dominant in Iraq, and they are the majority in Iraq. And even in Lebanon, we'll see what happens with the shakeout after the explosion, but Hezbollah is still dominant. Basically, Iran controls the Fertile Crescent from Iran to Iraq to Syria to Lebanon. They control all of that. And then if you add Yemen, Saudi Arabia feels surrounded, and UAE and Bahrain feel the heat. And Israel, they view befriending Israel is another protective layer for them against the Iranians, particularly if they can get the more advanced weapon systems to make it even better. All right. So I think this is okay. It's for Israel. This is not something that is a game changer. It is not something that completely changes everything in the Middle East. Can you trust these countries? How long will it last? Do they stop supporting terrorism? Do they stop supporting Hamas? How much money do they cut Hamas off from? Do they stop funding weapons? Do they stop funding ISIS and Islamic Jihad and Al Qaeda and all these places? We will see. That is yet to be determined. One hopes that will happen. This is a big win for Bahrain and UAE, I think, ultimately, although now they are going to come under pressure from the more radical portions of their population. And it's going to be interesting to see if any of the leaders in these countries are going to be threatened. Their lives will be threatened. Think about the first Arab leader to sign a peace deal with Israel, Sadat, who was murdered a year afterwards in Egypt. So how well will these leaders survive? But it's I don't know that you can trust this. How long it lasts depends on the shifting preferences and the shifting sentiment in those countries and in the Middle East more broadly. And so while I think it's good, yeah, I think it's good. Do I think it's a game changer? No. Do I think it justifies all the PR that's being done about this? No, I don't think so. We will see. I think Israelis are happy because they're happy whenever there's a peace deal signed and they didn't have to give anything up here. So it's just there's no net negative. But again, I don't trust regimes that are not free. and I don't trust this, and they'll have to keep an eye on UAE and Bahrain in terms of what they actually do and what actually happens as a consequence. So we will see. We will see how this all plays out. But yeah, it's. I'm not going to Dubai. I'm not going to Bahrain, no matter how much anybody tries to convince me or pay me. All right. Just a quick reminder of the standard reminders that you always get. Don't forget to like the show. We've got about 160 live. We've only got 53 likes, so please go over and like the show. Don't forget to share the show. In particular, share the short segments. I just put up a segment on capitalism, a short segment on capitalism. I don't know why you guys don't like the more positive segments that I put up. You know, everybody likes it when I slam the left and I get angry and I get mad and I rant against people. But when I do stuff that's positive, I don't know. The whole orientation is a little discouraging, I guess. Discouraging. Okay, so go like. There should be over 100 likes at this point. And of course, don't forget to support the show. You can do that on the Super Chat. We've had some incredibly successful Super Chat sessions lately, going over $1,000, going over $500, $600. Don't make this one a laggard. So please support the show. We don't have a lot of time to do a lot of Super Chat questions, but I do give priority to the ones that have a lot of dollars associated with them. And of course, you can also use the Super Chat feature just to give money without actually asking a question. By the way, those of you who are listening afterwards, there's a clapping feature on in YouTube now where you can, after the fact, press that and contribute some dollars through that. That is another nice way to support the show, even if you're not watching live. Of course, you can support the show at yaronbrookshow.com/support or Patreon or Subscribestar or whatever. All right. So that's my view of the peace deal. Nice, good, but nothing to get too excited about. And I'm still suspicious. I don't trust them. They're dictatorships. These are not good guys. One of the most horrific stories that I've seen, I'm sure you've seen the video, is of this guy, we think it's a guy, who walks up to a police car in Compton, California, and basically point blank shoots the two officers in the car. I think both of them are still in hospital, one of them at least struggling for their lives. It's not only that somebody would do that. Of course, we saw the same thing, by the way. It seems amazing to me that people don't remember this. We saw the same thing, police being targeted, ambushed, after the Black Lives Matter movement was launched in, 2015, during the demonstrations back then. And there was a huge spike in murders of policemen. There was the Dallas, but there were several locations around the country where this has happened, where people directly targeted police for basically execution, for killing, an attempt to kill them, attempts to kill them, and sadly, successfully killing the police. And this is not like gangs trying to intimidate the police or trying to as part of them defending their turf or trying to send a message or anything like that. This is just people targeting the police for murder. And maybe even more horrific, well, it can't be more horrific, but maybe as horrific as the murders themselves were, the attempted murders on these two police in Compton, was the videos that showed people cheering this, blocking the hospital, and people saying on video as they're filming this that they hope the police were dead. And this follows on from the fact that in places like Washington, D.C., during some of these demonstrations, people were advocating for attacking the police, for killing police, for going after police. And this is, it's just truly is horrific. Somebody says there's no applaud option under the video. I see the applaud version on the old videos, not this video, but the old videos. I think after it posts, you get the applaud version. I mean, this is truly a sign of civilization in decay. We're not only police being targeted, the representative of the law, the representatives of government are being targeted for cold-blooded murder. There are people who support this, and there is a kind of, there's no outrage about this. I understand the outrage when a policeman shoots somebody or kills somebody. Usually it's not in cold blood. Usually there's some mitigating factors. Putting a knee on somebody's neck is the way they did in Minneapolis. I don't think is excusable, but it's not premeditated in the sense of this murder. Shooting the guy in the back 7 times seems absurd and nutty and crazy. But it's not walking into somebody and just putting a bullet in the head. This is truly horrific, and the idea that this is not a big deal, that this is not the biggest deal right now, that there are people out there advocating for killing police, and much of the mainstream media, I wouldn't say ignoring it, but it's certainly not giving it the space that it deserves, and not being critical of the people that are doing this. And not making the connection, purposefully trying not to make the connection between this and the whole atmosphere of rioting, of violence, and of the protests themselves. The protests themselves that are not just saying, and this is on Black Lives Matter, not just saying enough with police brutality, not even just saying there's a lot of racists among the police force, we need to eradicate racism within the police force. But when Black Lives Matter goes out there, and when the media goes out there, and when intellectuals go out there, and everybody goes out there and says, the whole system is racist and corrupt. Everything about the American system of government, everything about the American system is racist and corrupt. It's all geared towards destroying the lives of blacks. It's all geared towards killing blacks. And the cops are just representative of the system, so at best, we should defund them or actually eliminate the police, which these people really believe in. And at worst, and this is granted rare that anybody calls for this, but it is sometimes debated and discussed, kill them. Because they represent the system that is inherently corrupt, worse than corrupt, inherently racist, inherently enslaving, inherently evil. And given that they are representatives of it, it's okay to kill them. Black Lives Matter needs to be criticized for all of that. Black Lives Matter is an evil proposal that is only going to lead to bloodshed, and it's wrong on every count. And it's going to alienate. It's going to alienate any rational person. Would be alienated by such rhetoric. Really? You want to eliminate the police? Well, if you want to eliminate the police, this guy's coming out and helping you by shooting a few. And I think Carl says Black Lives Matter is losing support. I think that's right. I think it's lost support because of the riots, because of its defense of rioters. It's lost support because of its attitude towards the police, defunding police, eliminating police departments. Americans, even Americans who think they're real, big, racist problems in this country, don't believe that the solution is dismantling the country, dismantling the police, dismantling the system of government. As long as Black Lives Matter advocate for those, that is the solution. As long as Black Lives Matter supports these far left crazy ideas, not supports, initiates them, they will lose support. I've said many times, and I'll say it again, this country is not far left. This country does not support the far left. Any whiff of Biden caving into the far left reduces the possibility that he will actually win. So it's only because people believe that Biden is a centrist, that he is leading in the polls and has any chance of beating Trump. If Trump succeeds in convincing the American people that Biden really is represented by Black Lives Matter, that Biden is Black Lives Matter representative in government, that Biden is as far left as they are, then he will lose. Biden supports BLM the way almost everybody out there seems to support BLM, as against police brutality, against racism, and so on. But if people think that Biden supports defunding the police, if people think that Biden supports eliminating police, if people think Biden supports violence against the police, or people believe Biden supports dismantling the entire American political and economic system, they will not vote for him. That's not where America is. It's not where America is. Thank you, Christian. Really appreciate that. Christian is single-handedly, making sure that that today's show has a good super chat revenue. So you guys should help Christian out. Should help Christian out. All right. So I think the shooting and the response to it is indicative of how far the left has gone and how nutty it is, and how ultimately how the left will self-destruct and how the left is self-destructing. CKJC is Christian. How the left is self-destructing. And the question then is, what comes after that? What comes after that? Where do we go from there? And I don't know, but it's scary. It's scary once you desensitize. Once you desensitize people from shooting police, where do we go from there? And it just becomes worse and worse. Let me take this super chat question, $20 super chat question, because it's kind of on this topic exactly. As the West's sense of life gets worse and worse, are people becoming numb to the violence and misery? Yes, people are becoming numb to the violence. People becoming numb to the looting, to the rioting, and now I think to some extent to shooting police. And I think this bodes very, very ill for the United States, because as people become numb to the violence, to rioting, to mayhem, to anarchy, to lack of leadership, they will become more and more supportive of means to address these issues that are in themselves rights violating. So I've said this many, many times. I'll say it again. And I'm now more and more convinced that this is going to happen faster. And I think the American people will accept it. I really do think American people will accept it. I think we're heading towards authoritarianism. I think we're heading towards authoritarianism fast. I think it could happen within the next decade. It'll be a soft authoritarianism. It'll be, couched as law and order, martial law kind of authoritarianism. And it will attempt to keep markets kind of working and markets free. I mean, the model most countries in the world are looking at right now, including, in my view, the United States, whether we know it or not. But the model we are looking at right now is the Chinese model. It's basically a model where politics is authoritarian and economics is semi-loosely, somewhat, maybe free. That's the model. And here's some ways in which this could, absolutely happen. Right? Imagine either Biden, or particularly if Trump wins, and then the left goes nuts and there riots in the streets, and maybe there's some shootings, and maybe some Trump people go out there with guns, and it's just mayhem. And in city after city after city, the cities are burning, and things are really out of control, as they are right now in places like Portland. They have been in Chicago, on and off, but it really escalates from here in a significant way. Well, there's no question, I think, that Trump would Trump would, use the Insurgent Act to deploy the military, which would not be the wrong decision. I mean, it might be the right thing to do. And then the question is, what happens at that point? How bloody does it get? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it works quickly and it's done and it's over and we're done. Is martial law declared? Does the military object, and what stance does the military take with regard to all of this? And you could see it, or you could see the flip side. Imagine if Biden is president, and the right, all of a sudden these militias take up arms and claim that he stole the election, and there's violence in the streets, and is then martial law declared, or if COVID goes up and Biden is president and he has a national lockdown and a bunch of people refuse to lock down, they go out into the streets and they carry their weapons, and what happens under these kind of circumstances? And I think, given the American people's response to lockdowns, I think we're at a point where the American people, if there's a lot of violence or there's a lot of anything else, if there's lots of problems, that American people are willing, I think, to accept martial law and military in the streets. Right? I think that is possible. Bash Bannigan asks, is there a point where you would leave the United States? Yeah, I would definitely leave the United States once my freedom of speech was infringed upon. Once I couldn't do this show. Once I couldn't promote my ideas. Once the freedom to speak my mind disappeared, I would look for somewhere else to go to. It's not clear where, because if freedom of speech goes in the United States, I'm not sure it could be preserved anywhere else. But it's hard to tell, but yes, if that would be one scenario. Another scenario is if I was directly targeted by either left or right because of my opinions, where they were threatening my life. I would have to figure out where I could go in order to survive and thrive. Right. All right, we're getting a flood of $20 questions now. Okay. Jason asks, is there a point where you would leave the United States? I said yes. I mean, if it was going to be, if freedom of speech was gone, I would leave. Now, I will say that there are circumstances in which you could imagine staying and fighting, but I'd have to be convinced there was somebody who would stay and fight with me, that there was somebody who was capable of fighting, that there was armed resistance was doable. I'm not a big believer in suicide and in just dying for no real purpose. And American people today do not fill me with confidence in terms of their sense of life, in terms of what they're willing to tolerate, in terms of their willingness to actually fight for freedom. Not fill me with confidence in terms of being successful and in a kind of a revolution against whatever forces were right. I couldn't align myself with the left. I could never align myself with the right. So who knows where I would go? Somebody asked, what about New Zealand? I mean, New Zealand is a nice place to go and retire, and maybe that's what I would do. Maybe I could do a show from there. There was still freedom of speech there. It's hard to tell, and it's hard to tell. There's Europe. Certain countries in Europe might stay free. Israel might stay free. Certain places in Latin America might stay free. It's hard to tell. Where could you disappear and broadcast from where you would feel safe? But I really hope that it doesn't come to that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We still are doing this show. I'm still speaking up. I'm still being invited to speak at universities and elsewhere. My voice is still being heard out there, not by as many people as I'd like, but it's still out there. And as long as it's out there, then I will, as long as I can project it, then I will stay in America. And those of you who don't think Puerto Rico is America, look up your, you should look up your, I guess, the legal status of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is the U.S. If the FBI decided to arrest me, they could arrest me right here in Puerto Rico. There's no problem of jurisdiction. Yep. So just because it's on the topic, I'll answer this. Capitalist Nick asks, both NBA and NFL viewership is down 30%, pushing this JW narrative in your face. At what point would you consider not watching your beloved Celtics and joining the boycott of the NBA product? I don't know. I mean, I think that it's already borderline for me. It definitely reduces my enjoyment of the game. I just consider their support of BLM to be naive and dumb rather than, evil, right? And if I thought that they really believed in this stuff, I thought that they really supported it, I thought it was real, then I would stop watching the Celtics. Not anybody cares that I watch the Celtics. But I think viewership is down primarily because they're not live games. I think it's really hard to watch a not live game. I'm watching the games, and it's not as much. It's nowhere near as much fun. I'm not interested in watching it. And I've been withdrawing from the NFL for a long time, primarily because of the injuries. So I'm boycotting the NFL because of injuries, not because of this. People expressing their views. I think the views are wrong. I think the NFL owners have caved as an organization, but it's a private enterprise. They're expressing views that I disagree with. Yeah, I mean, at some point, I would boycott them as long as I think that it's still basically somewhat innocent, right? Then I don't. Then I'm not going to boycott them. If I think it's malicious, then I would boycott them. I mean, everybody. I know, almost every bank, every financial institution, every Fidelity, Vanguard, all those companies, almost every company out there now has a Black Lives Matter statement on their website. Am I going to stop living because it's the politically correct thing to do now is to grovel before BLM? No. I mean, think about all the companies that are giving them material help by sending them dollars. And we're going to create a list and boycott all those companies. It's not practical. This is where the culture is. The only way to change that is to change the culture. All right. And that's what we're trying to do, right? That's what we're trying to do right here, right now. Okay, a few quick ones. I don't have a lot here, but I want to say something about this English department at the University of Chicago, of all places. University of Chicago, one of the better universities in the country, both academically, but also in terms of standing up for free speech, standing up against deplatforming, standing up against trigger warnings and all of that crap. The English department, and by the way, English departments generally are the worst departments in academia. They're much worse even than philosophy departments. Philosophy departments are much saner these days than English departments. This is where postmodernism has its strongest foothold, in where ethnic studies of all varieties have the strongest foothold. So the English department in University of Chicago has announced that they every year they take a handful of probably half a dozen PhD students every year. And they've announced that they will only be taking PhD students this coming year who want to specialize in what we call the struggle of Black and Indigenous people. This is an English department. And, their explanation for this is, here's the explanation for this. And think about how horrific this is. Everything today, think about it in this term, everything today is politicized. Everything today is through the lens of race and politics. There's no art. There's no English. There's no literature. There's literature as politics. Literature as reflection on race. Literature as something political. The idea of aesthetics, for the sake of aesthetics, is gone. So, I was listening to a podcast earlier. I'm going to do a show on this because it was so infuriating. A show about Beethoven's Fifth and how Beethoven's Fifth and the attitude of people towards Beethoven is exclusionary and ultimately racist and imperialistic and just evil and bad. Why? One of the reasons they give is because to go to the concert and listen to a symphony, there are norms that include things like dressing nicely, sitting quietly, and things like that. Anyway, I'm going to do a show on it. I'm going to take that clip from the thing and we're going to analyze it. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, this is what the English department writes. They write, quote, English as a discipline has a long history of providing aesthetic rationalization for colonization, exploitation, extraction, and anti-blackness. Our discipline is responsible for developing hierarchies of cultural production that have contributed directly to social and systemic determinations of whose lives matter and why. So the idea that you say that, Victor Hugo's literature is better than literature that is produced in the Congo, the idea that you would say that is racist, is culturally hierarchical. The idea that Western civilization is better, the idea that Western art is better, the idea that Western art reaches down to the depth of human emotions in a way that other cultures' aesthetics doesn't. The idea that Western sculpture is better than Islamic sculpture or better than Chinese sculpture, that is culture, developing hierarchies of cultural production. And therefore, English that studies literature and language, the idea that English literature, that these books are, stories about in English, that in English literature and Western literature and so on, the idea that we've spent a huge amount of time on this is bad and wrong, and we need to get away from that. And the only way to compensate for all the years that we've been spending just on Western literature, and thus reinforcing this idea that the West is better, the only way to do that is to focus our attention now on black studies. Now, it's not that they don't have a lot of black studies already, but we need to now focus it all on black studies so that we can overcome. It's like affirmative action, right? There was indeed, but the difference in affirmative action, it's a backlash against something real. There was racism, there was all this, so now we have to correct it by hiring more blacks in order to correct this, right? So now we have to study more, black literature, even if it's inferior. And just me saying black literature that might be inferior is obviously, according to them, racist, because how could it be? How dare I even make? And this is part of the Beethoven analysis. How do you know what's better and what's worse? Who's to say? By what standard? This is the postmodernism in the English departments. And they continue writing, and while inroads have been made in terms of acknowledging the centrality of both individual literary works and collective histories of racialized and colonized people, so they've already put a lot of work into this, there is still much to do as a discipline and as a department to build a more inclusive and equitable field for describing, studying, and teaching the relationship between aesthetics, representation, inequality, and power. See how everything is power? What is power? What is the essential of power? That's politics. What they mean by power is not economic power, though they confuse economic power with political power. What they mean by power is political power. The power of the gun. Everything for them, every experience, every human interaction, everything is politics. So, this is what you get. English department only. Andrew reminds me here that the Oscars as well, the Oscars, film Oscars, who celebrate excellence in cinema, supposedly. Now, they don't always celebrate excellence. They often celebrate mediocrity or worse. The Oscars now will only consider a movie for best film, I think this is in 2024, if the film is appropriately diverse. And you can imagine that the themes of the movie will play a role as well. I mean, God. Now that I will boycott. I've been boycotting the Oscars anyway because I think it's a mediocre. I hate celebrities. I dislike modern celebrities, and their attitude towards everybody else. And, I like the pump and circumstance of the Oscars, but I despise everything else. Okay. A. Campbell says, going to need a show dedicated to positivity and optimism. Too much of a defeatist attitude in the chat. America has overcome much greater threats than what exists today. Cheer up, all of you. I hope you're right. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough because I picked these articles out of the news because that's what is in the news. There was very little positive in the news. Okay, another quick one. This one's about landlords, and you remember I said something about landlords. I published an op-ed. You might have seen my op-ed defending landlords. The Tribune company picked it up, and then I thought they would publish it in like the Chicago Tribune or the LA Times or other the big newspapers that they cover. It was published in a couple of third-rate small little outlets because who the hell wants to read an op-ed about defending landlords right to actually have the occupant live by the contract, actually have people pay when they're supposed to pay. And, it was anti-Trump, but also anti a bunch of Democratic governors who basically put this moratorium on rent until the beginning of the year. Right? This is a Trump policy. So the response of the real estate industry is this. And I'm quoting today, the Apartment Industries National Association distributed a blast saying, asking members to demand that Congress provide billions for rental assistance in response to the CDC eviction moratorium. So the idea is Trump basically put this moratorium forward that nobody has to pay rent until the beginning of the year. So what's the response? It's not trying to get rid of the moratorium. Not for Congress to pass a bill that says, no, they are allowed to collect bill and override the president. No, because that partially couldn't pass and doesn't have a chance of passing. It would make the landlords seem egoistic. It would make the landlords seem like they don't care, that they just want to make money. Instead, what they're asking all their members is to write to Congress to fix the economic consequence of this by having the government provide billions and billions of dollars in handouts to renters so that the renters can then afford to pay the rent. So it's not about getting the government out of the way so we can go back to work, so we can actually engage in an economy so that people can afford, because that would have them take up a position about COVID, which would be unattractive. It's not about government, stay out of this, none of your business, let me deal with my renters myself and figure out what kind of, nobody wants to kick out people out of their apartments. People, a renter, so if somebody's been steady, always paid the rent and is now in hard times, and a landlord, it's hard to find people to replace that person, they might give them a few months to catch up anyway. But no, this is more handouts. So one regulation leads to other regulations, which then lead to other regulations, which basically lead to more taxes, more controls, more government intervention. And business is calling for this, but this always happens, right? Government regulates business, so business lobbies government to do things that will increase regulations, not decrease them. Increase government involvement, not decrease it. And so we head towards more and more and more collectivism, more and more socialism, more and more stuff. Yes, negativity today. Sorry, guys. All right, Michael saying, somewhat off topic, but I'm curious, how can you rationally find happiness in this life if you're born severely mentally or physically handicapped? You might not be able to. And that's the truth, right? So particularly if you're mentally handicapped to such a degree that you can't. But if you've watched, I don't know if you guys have seen Peanut Butter Falcon, this movie, Peanut Butter Falcon. I think it's on one of the streaming services. I think it's on Netflix. A Down syndrome, it's about a Down syndrome kid. But it's an inspiring story, and it's a really cute movie. And the kid who's playing the Down syndrome has Down syndrome. And he does a great job. So even Down syndromes can achieve stuff, can do things, right? But so depending on how bad it is, but let's say you're in severe pain. You can't achieve happiness when you're in severe pain, right? Happiness is built on the whole life is built on this pain pleasure mechanism, and pleasure is impossible. And if pain is your life, then suicide is very much a real possibility. Now there has to be happiness is not always possible. It's not always possible for lots of reasons. Let's say, I don't wish this on anybody, of course, but let's say you're living a good life and everything, and I don't know, something horrible happens, and your wife, who you love dearly, and and your kids, let's say they all get killed for whatever reason. I mean, it's going to be hard to be happy afterwards. It's going to be hard. So we have to be realistic about what is possible. I think happiness is possible to healthy, but there can be accidents, there can be flukes, there can be crazy things out there that make life not worth living, or life really, really hard to live, or happiness really, really hard to attain. Let's say you're in a concentration camp, or let's say you're in a country, let's say you're born in Saudi Arabia. Let's say you're a woman born in Saudi Arabia. How are you going to attain happiness? Let's say you're a smart kid. Let's say you're the next Einstein born in central Congo. How are you going to achieve happiness? There's so many circumstances. I mean, I don't want to overemphasize this, because I think for most of us, certainly living in a relatively free country, certainly living in the kind of world we live right now, there are lots of ways to be happy. But sometimes there's just bad luck. Sometimes they're bad genes. Sometimes you're born in the wrong place. Not sometimes. Some people are born in the wrong place. It's not like we're born over and over again, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Right? But if you're healthy, if you live in a good place, and if you can get the kind of help that helps you become psychologically healthy, then you should be able to achieve happiness. But again, not guaranteed. Not guaranteed. All right, last depressing news story that I didn't actually list in a thing, but it's the last one, and then I'm going to go to your super chat questions. Is just as I read it just before the show. It turns out that today Google was in front of the Senate. Google executives were in front of the Senate Antitrust Committee, where they got reamed by Republicans who claim that they have a monopoly over internet advertising, and that impacts their decisions, like having in the search engine, having a preference for the left over the right, and that they need to be regulated. So Google is under huge fire in the Senate by your friends, the Republicans. Not accidentally, Josh Hawley, the Republican I love to hate the most, was leading this charge against Google. Google is also pretty confident that within a month, or if not, then just Republican-led Justice Department or the FTC is going to file antitrust lawsuit against Google, and call for either breaking them up or penalties or some remedy against Google because of their monopoly power. And this is under a Republican administration and a Republican Senate. In addition, and this is what really, Brandon Cropper, this is why some people embarrass the philosophy they claim to adhere to. Google's head should be tried for treason and fried, not fired, fried. This is what gives objectivism a bad name, is people like Brandon. Facebook is about to be sued by the FTC for antitrust. So Republican administration, supposed believers in markets, FTC appointed by Republicans, all Trump nominees have control over it, a Senate that is a majority Republicans, and a Justice Department run by a Republican Attorney General. are going to go after Google, Facebook. If you don't remember exactly objectivism's position on antitrust, I highly recommend Ayn Rand's essay on antitrust. Ayn Rand's, basically declaring antitrust the most evil of all the laws in the books, and basically saying that it was the beginning of the end of American freedom, American capitalism, when it was passed in 1890. So those objectivists out there who believe antitrust laws should be used in order to fry businessmen, oh my God. Oh my God. Right. Okay, so there's a little bit more for you to be depressed about. Nobody is arguing for freedom anymore. It's gone. Even people who call themselves objectivists now want to use the state to get their views across. Right? That's what's important. All right, a few of the higher dollar Super Chat questions quickly, and then we will get to older Super Chat questions. Before that, let me remind everybody to like the show. We've got 188 people watching it right now live. We've got 127 likes. We should be at 200 likes given how many people have gone in and out. So please press that like button. It's really easy. Share the show, particularly the shorter segments. And of course, don't forget to support the show if you can. And if you get value out of it, be a trader, value for value, and support the show. You can do that on Super Chat. Here on YouTube, those of you on Facebook can jump over to YouTube and support the show there. Facebook doesn't have yet a mechanism to do it easily. And then, of course, you can do so on yaronbrookshow.com/support, on Patreon, on Subscribestar. Those are my favorite kind of contributions because those I can plan for. They're regular, they're monthly. I know exactly what's coming in. It makes life much easier in terms of planning. All right, a few questions. One difference from China is that American citizens own 48% of all the guns in the world. They own 100x as many guns as the military. Doesn't that make authoritarianism more difficult? I don't believe so. I've talked about this many, many times, and I will, I guess I have to answer this question over and over and over again. I keep getting it. No, I don't believe so, because I don't believe that Americans would use those guns to fight authoritarianism. I don't think Americans would know what authoritarianism is if it bit them in the face. And if they did use the guns, what would they use the guns for? What kind of system of government would they advocate for as a replacement of our existing system of government? Who would they place in power to replace the authoritarian in chief, whoever came to be? No, I think most Americans who have guns because it makes them feel good and feel secure, but they wouldn't know how to use them, and they would be too cowardly to actually use them. When the Americans rose up against the British, the probability of success was very small, but a significant percentage of the population knew what freedom was, believed in freedom, was willing to fight for freedom, and understood that what they were fighting for and who they were fighting against. If you asked Americans who have guns, what would you fight for? They might say the Constitution if they're on the right and limited government, but they don't know what those mean. They have no concept of what those mean. And their support of Trump is an indication of that. And on the left, because a lot of those guns are owned by leftists, they would want socialism. So I don't know what they are going to use their guns for. To promote what? To reach where? I mean, and by the time we get authoritarianism, we will get it because the American people want it. Because a majority, see, this is the difference between a revolution against the king who's imposing his will on you, and an authoritarian who you have encouraged to come into power, that you support. So, to me, the guns that the Americans people have are meaningless. The fact that it's 100x as many guns as the military, a lot of us have Glocks, even AR-15s, and, none of us have tanks. None of us have, F-16s. None of us have the NSA who can listen to all of us and know exactly where we are and what we're doing and what we're planning and what we want to do. who have, back doors into everything that we do and everything that we say. Really, I mean, if anybody has under the illusion that that you could fight against the military, the U.S. military, I think there's some hope. The only hope against authoritarianism is that the military would stand up against an authoritarian. But even there, the authoritarian is going to be slow. It's going to be creeping. It's going to be one little thing after the other little thing after the other thing. And in many regards, our freedoms will be maintained in other realms. So we'll feel like, oh, well, that's not too bad. We've already done that, right? We gave the government the ability to break up companies when it didn't like them. Call it antitrust laws. We gave up the ability. We gave the government the ability to take our money whenever they wanted to redistribute to other people. Call that income tax, 1913. We took away the right of banks to issue currency and gave it all to one central monopolized government-run institution called the Fed. We did that in 1914. We've given up our right to hire and fire people at will. Call that labor regulations. We've given up slowly over 130 years. We have given up more and more and more and more and more of our rights. So that is going to continue and will reach a tipping point. And it's like the boiling frogs phenomena. By the time it reaches a tipping point, we'll say, no, we need authoritarianism to save us from the left. Or we need authoritarianism to save us from the right. Or we'll need authoritarianism to save us from BLM. We need authoritarianism to save us from cop killers. We need authoritarianism we'll rationalize it. And all those guns that Americans have will be for naught. In a country. They'll get people to use those guns against their fellow Americans in support of whatever regime comes into power. Yeah, the video is glitching. I apologize that the video is glitching. So no, I mean, I don't think the guns save us. I think it's a false narrative to assume that an armed civilian population is always going to defend liberty. When people don't know if a majority of Americans understood what liberty was, then we'd have a liberty. If a small minority of Americans understood what liberty was, we'd have liberty. The fact is that a large, overwhelming majority of Americans don't understand what liberty is. And that's why we don't have liberty. If you have not already done so, please reach out to the Weinstein brothers, Joe Rogan and John Anderson, to request they invite you onto their podcast. Thank you. Yeah, if you do that, please do it respectfully, do it nicely, doing it in a supportive way, and don't make it sound like we're crazy radicals. Just one more voice that would be a value for them to bring to the general public. But yes, I think that would be terrific. To be on Joe Rogan or to be on one of the Weinsteins or any other podcast you can think of other than those that I've, big ones, other than the ones that I've recommended not be used, that I won't go on, that I've suggested I won't go on. All right. And in an irrational mixed economy, is there a split between the moral and the practical? Wow. Not really. But what is Yaron going for headshots? I'm not sure I understand that. Not really, but the fires are getting my internet. Yeah, I think it's the time of day. I think everybody is streaming because on the weekends I don't have this problem. But I think like everybody's like stopped working and they're all streaming on Netflix and stuff, and they're eating up my bandwidth. I think that is what's going on because I'm on cable, right? Not on fiber, but on cable. The more people use it, the lower the bandwidth you get. So even though I've got the highest bandwidth. All right. In an irrational... yes, there's a sense in which that can happen, right? So in a mixed economy, you can, for example, lie, steal, cheat. You might be able to grovel before the government, bribe government officials, and so on. And that will result in the practical sense in which you'd make money, right? That's right. But not if you view the practical in a broader sense as leading to happiness. So the practical is the moral in the deep sense. maybe not on the intermediate values, but in the ultimate values, the moral and the practical are the same. In the intermediate values, the more mixed the economy is, the more those intermediate values conflict with morality. The more the mixed economy makes it difficult to gain those intermediate values because of the mixed economy. So, but the deep values require, the ultimate values, the values that really shape your life require you to be moral, and to the extent that you violate morality. Now, look, the other thing to remember is, what does the moral mean when you've got a gun put against your head? So you also have to be clear about morality, what morality actually entails. What morality actually entails. Oh my God, is the Heat and Celtics are in overtime, and here I am talking to you guys. Just so you appreciate the level of sacrifice. I'm joking. I'm kidding. Yeah, last time they were in overtime, I think, I was somewhere too, so I missed that other overtime game as well. All right. Oh my God, anybody who considers Trump a macho man doesn't know what a man means. Doesn't have any concept of what manhood means. If Trump is a man, then who the hell wants to be a man? God. I mean, this is the irrationality that drives me nuts. You can be a Trump supporter without viewing Trump as a man. Oh my God. Lying is manly. Having primacy of consciousness is manly. Being an a-hole is manly. Oh my God. All right, do you think a new respect and understanding of freedom like what happened in the 80s could be sparked again? Yeah, I think it could. I mean, the fact that it failed ultimately, suggests that it's going to be harder and harder and harder, right? We had that. We had the 80s. Yeah, calling Carly Fiorina ugly and in a presidential debate. That's a man. That's a man's man. That's a macho man. That's disgusting. He's a buffoon. Anyway, do you think, and you respect, and you can still say, I'm going to vote for him, that's fine. But just call him a buffoon when he's a buffoon. He's not a man. And say, I prefer this buffoon to Biden. That's fine. I understand that. But the defense of him, that's what is nutty. So I think it's possible. Respect and understanding of freedom is possible. It's going to be hard. It's going to be harder. It's every decade that passes, it makes it more difficult because the left is more entrenched and the right has become more and more irrational. And what you're seeing today is a completely irrational right, a statist right, and that statism, that irrationality, and that horrific left is, making it more and more difficult. Now, you might see a backlash against statism. But you'd need real leadership to do that. You'd real cultural penetration. You see, what made the 80s possible were a number of things. One, Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand was in the culture. She'd been around. She was well known. Her books were being read. They were there. Right. Two, Milton Friedman is a public intellectual defending markets, and giving a good name to capitalism. Three, a conservative movement that is as impotent as it was focused on economic freedom. It was this coalition of religious, foreign policy, and economic freedom, right? And within that coalition, even people like Buckley emphasized economic freedom, not as much as we would like, not in the right way. And then four, you had a charismatic leader in Reagan. Now, today you have no Ayn Rand, you have no Milton Friedman, You have no conservative movement respecting economic liberty. Nothing, zero, zilch. There's nobody out there. I mean, once in a while, one of them will say something pro-markets, but it's rarer and rarer. And for nobody with the kind of charisma. No one with the kind of charisma that that Reagan had, and the positivity and the optimism. Instead, this is the party of Donald Trump. This is, again, why I've said over and over again that Donald Trump must be defeated, because the only chance of resurrecting a Republican Party that stands for a semblance of freedom, that stands even moderately for America, for economic freedom, for capitalism, is to replace the existing Trumpist generation of politicians. And I don't know if that's possible. Even if he loses, I don't know if that's possible. Right? No, Rand was absolutely right about Ronald Reagan and wrong about Ronald Reagan at the same time. She was absolutely right that Ronald Reagan turned the Republican Party into the party of the religious right, thus destroying the Republican Party, and the result of all of that is Donald Trump. And of course, she was wrong in the sense of she saw the long-term impact, and she didn't get the short-term impact. The short-term impact was a changing in the psyche of Americans, the optimism, the opening up of markets, and the innovation and productivity that led to. But that is in spite of the fact that she was right about the long-term evil that she created. Right. Was Dr. Kevorkian a hero? Yes, absolutely. I think anybody who was willing to stand up and fight for what was right, the right to die is an extension of the right to live. If there's no meaning to the right to your life if you don't have the ability to choose to end it. And the fact that he was willing to help people who made that choice, was careful about who he chose, and stood up to the law and stood up to the irrational legal system, and bear the consequences. It wasn't what he was doing was not a slap in the face of the rule of law. He recognized that the law was against him, but he was willing to bear the consequence of violating the law, and he made a big deal out of it, and he did it for PR, and he got the law changed in many places. So I think he was a good guy. Bree asked, someone had made a deep fake of Hitler and Stalin's state portraits. Singing video killed the radio star. I don't know what that means. Regular people have the power to show the clowns these people are. There is hope. Look it up. It is hilarious. I think the hope is with you guys, the hope is that we have an internet. The hope is that we have mechanisms by which we can leverage our ideas to millions of people. And that is the hope. And I am worried because I don't see enough people using the internet, using social media, using the means that we have to promote the right kind of ideas, to leverage those ideas. I just don't see enough traction. I don't see enough people engaged. There are millions of hits on really, really stupid videos and stupid ideas, on evil ideas, and very little engagement on the good ideas. And I also don't think that we, as a movement, I mean, not all of you, because not all of you are part of my movement, but those of you who are part of my movement are not very good at doing this, and not very good at getting the word out there, not very good at sharing videos, at creating videos, on being creative and doing memes and putting together stuff and getting the word out there. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take tens of thousands of people holding up the banner of freedom, being willing to fight for that freedom, being willing to challenge the status quo. Bree says Nikki will be the first Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is good. She's better than anything else I think the Republicans have right now. She's mixed, though, very mixed. But Nikki Haley will not be a Republican nominee, and she will not become president if Trump wins in November. And I think there's a good chance Trump will win. But if Trump wins, Nikki Haley is finished. Her political career basically is wiped out. She represents a part of the Republican Party that has no following. no following if Trump wins. If Trump wins, he is the Republican Party. The Republican becomes Trump's party, and that's not Nikki Haley's party. That's a completely different party. Again, why I've encouraged you not to vote for Trump, but you guys have to figure that out. All right, so here's a question. It's been hanging around here for a long time, and it's a $20 question, so I'm going to do it now. Now, this does have spoilers to Atlas Shrugged, so spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. There I go. I talked about Trump, and a bunch of people left, and I got another thumbs down. I just finished Atlas Shrugged, and while I was disgusted and angered by what was done to Dagny Reardon, especially the sickening torture of Galt, I did not feel pity or sorry for them. I felt admiration and respect as I knew they would ultimately prevail because they had morality on their side. I was surprised to find how much I was affected by two of the lesser characters in the book. By the mental breakdown and collapse of Eddie Willers. Well, I don't think he mentally broke down, but anyway. And most disturbing chapter for me was the suicide of Cheryl Taggart. I expected a more emotional response to Galt's torture, but do you think that is because I venerate his character above me and identify more closely with Eddie and Cheryl? Is it because I was mourning Eddie and Cheryl's wasted potential? Is that they had the right morality but not enough of it as a result succumbed to the looters? Yes and yes. So you identified more as Cheryl and Eddie. And I think if this was the first time you read the book, and if you are young, I think that is the right rational response. So I think it's a rational response to identify with Eddie and Cheryl. It's very hard to identify with Galt. And when you're young, it's very hard to identify with Dagny or Reardon. They've achieved so much. They achieve so much. Right. But it's easy for us, particularly again when you're young and you don't know if you're going to become a Dagny or a Reardon, and you don't know, not convinced you have the potential to be that, for you to identify with Eddie and Cheryl and take it to heart that they are suffering as a consequence, and you can associate that much more with your life, with your values, with what is going to happen to you. And there is this idea of their wasted potential and the fear that your potential will be wasted, that the world will crush you. Right? That, I think, is why you respond that way. And I think it's a healthy response. Because it's your personal values in a much more direct way. And as you say, Galt in some sense is above you. Galt is somebody to look up to, while Cheryl and Eddie are more like you. When I read Atlas Shrugged for the first time, I identify with Eddie. Right? I didn't consider myself a giant or a genius. Still don't. Right? So I couldn't identify with Galt, and I admired Galt and wanted to be like Galt, but I couldn't identify with Galt. And the same with, to somewhat less extent, but the same with Dagny and Reardon. So it's a great question, by the way. Really, really good question. And I'm always a little concerned when somebody reads Atlas Shrugged and immediately says, "Oh, I identified with Roark, Reardon, Galt." It's pretty arrogant. Pretty arrogant. What have you done with your life that would make you, not anybody else, you identify with Reardon or with Roark or with Galt? What metal have you discovered? What have you created? What philosophy did you write? What strike did you initiate? Most people who identify have done nothing. Yeah, Ken is just like Galt. He's exactly like Galt. And he's achieved. He's got a motor. He's got a motor. Go ask Ken. So, anyway. All right, Boston is leading by 1 with 14 seconds left. Ooh. Butler just got a 3-point play. Wow. All right. So Miami's up. Yeah, people have an unbelievable, unbelievably absurd sense of who they are and what they are. All right. Let's see. We've got some other questions. Sorry. So somebody asked, how do you, so again to the politics, how do you see all this but then want Biden to win? How does Trump destroy America but Biden stops these nihilistic forces? I don't want Biden to win. There's not a fiber in my body that wants Biden to win. I have no interest in Biden winning. I want Trump to lose. That's it. Right? So I want Trump to lose because I want there to be an opposition to Biden. I want Trump to lose because I want there to be a Republican Party that one day might rediscover the idea of liberty and freedom. I want Trump to lose so that the Republican Party can have a battle within it for its future and not just cave to what I think is the statism of Trump's ideas, to the extent that he has ideas. But the people behind him have ideas. That's what worries me. Trump is a vehicle. He's not, there's nothing. So that is what I want. I want Trump to, will Biden stop nihilistic forces? No, but neither will Trump. Trump is a nihilist himself, in a sense, right? He thrives on lies and everything going to hell. So it's not about wanting Biden to win. It's about wanting America to have a future. Somebody writes, the only positive to come out of the world burning is it makes your show bigger. Looking forward to hearing my past Super Chat questions answered. Working on it, man. But I hope it makes the show bigger. I'm not sure that it will. Yeah, looks like Miami won. That sucks. Wow. That was quite a play. What are the benefits of watching basketball? As a nerd, I have zero interest in it myself. I mean, that's fine. The benefits are...
I didn't get that. Could you try
Trevor
again?
Smith did a talk about the benefits of sports. I think it's in a world with very little... I
didn't get that. Could you try
romantic
again?
art. Sports is the last bastion of heroes, of admiration for ability, of
Here's what I
veneration
found.
of success. In sport, there are winners and there are losers. And it's that I love about sports. I love to see talent. I love to see talent on display. I love pride that is associated with talent. You can see that in every sport. These players are not selfless. They're not modest. They know they're good and they celebrate how good they are. So it is that I think is Siri. Oh, there's Siri again. Sorry. It is that I love about sports, and why I think it's something worth pursuing. Is by being a politician to get a license to start a business not immoral in today's context? It is really rational to work for cash off the books. How do you build credit or provide proof of income? I don't think it's immoral necessarily to bribe a politician to get a license. I don't think, is it really rational to work for cash off the books? It can be, depends on the context. That might be the only option you have. It might be the only possibility you have to make a living. How do you build credit or provide proof of income? That's a challenge, but you have to balance the two off. You have to balance the working for cash off the books with providing proof of income, with the idea of building credit and wanting to build credit. So it depends on your circumstance of life. It depends on where you are, what you do, what your profession is, what are your alternatives, what are your options. I think it's impossible to say as a blanket, you should never work off the books for cash, or that that building credit is always the most important thing possible, right? So you have to look at the context. You have to look at the context. Right. All right. Thanks everybody. This was fun. We've still got a ton of questions. And we'll keep going after the questions. On Thursday, the topic will be more positive. It won't be newsy, although it'll have some applications to the culture and to the news and to things going on. But on Thursday, I want to talk about risk. I want to talk about risk, about cultural attitude to risk, about individual attitudes towards risk, about what is the role of risk in human life, what is the role of risk should be in your life, how to deal with risk, how to handle risk, and what does it mean when a culture stops wanting to take risk, when people in a culture stop wanting to take risk, and why? What is the significance of that? It's a topic that Jennifer is funding. You can fund a topic by contributing $1,000, and I will do any topic you want within reason. But Jennifer chose risk. I'm eager to do any kind of topic you guys want. Thank you for all the super chatters. Thank you for supporting the show. I think we did pretty well today. Thank you for those of you who contribute on a monthly basis. Those of you who don't and would like to, you can do so on yaronbrookshow.com/support, on Patreon or Subscribestar, or Locals. You can, and of course, thank you everybody for those of you who like the show. Don't forget before you leave to make sure that you actually do like the show. And don't forget to share. Share, primarily I'd say the shorter videos, but also the longer videos. The way we win this is by you standing by your ideals, by you standing up for your values, by you advocating and helping me advocate for the ideas that we believe in. And the way for you to do that is, one way for you to do that is by sharing content on social media. So thanks everybody. Have a great night. I will see you all on Thursday, same time, same place. Bye everybody.